I have a Hayward 1.5 horsepower pool pump Model C48L2N134B1 It is brand new out of the box. When I turn on the pool timer it trips the GFI. I've checked the wires, for continuity, voltage 119.8 V neutral is 0.1. I've wired it according to the diagram. The 115V selector is set properly. I've replaced the GFI, just in case. Here's the confusion: if I take the selector plug off, the GFI it doesn't trip. In 230V mode the pump runs until the thermo protector kicks it off. I'm at a loss.
Hi, I'm Mike and I'll be glad to assist you. You state that there is continuity on the neutral and that will trip the GFCI. Check with the pump unwired on the feed and then the pump to determine where the fault is.
Continuity on lines V/W/G is good all the way to the pump. GFI stays on when pump is disconnected, pump is connected, but 115V selector plug is disconnected, pump is wired for 230V.
You have me confused. Is the pump intended to be 120 volts or 240 volts? You stated 120 volts in the question and then later stated it is wired for 240 volts. Please clarify.
The pump can be arranged in 120 or 240V. I need to have it set at 120V.
The selector needs to be set for 120 volts. If this is a replacement, what is the amperage listed on the motor and what is the breaker size?
I know the selector needs to be set to 120, that's what's bothering me. It only trips the GFI when it is. The pump amperage is 18.6 for 120V. The breaker is a 50 amp breaker. I have to step out for a few hours. We'll be back at 6 p.m. estate.
Swap the connections. Black to L1 and white to L2. Test. If it trips, remove the ground connection and test again. Let me know the results.
Black to L1, white to L2 equals trip. Black to L1, white to L2 no ground equals trip. White to L1, black to L2 equals trip.
The motor seems to have a fault. Return it.
I just got this one, returned the one prior for a fault, same thing happening. What is the likelihood that I got two in a row that are bad out of the box?
Very slim, but possible. If the breaker hold with the pump not wired, then it has to be the failure of E-pump. You have a circuit that is sized high enough that it isn't an overload. You have the right voltage, that only leaves the pump.
2 bought the first replacement, because the existing one started to trip the key. It was an older pump, so it decided it must be the pump. Same issue with replacement pump 1, now with replacement pump 2. I'm at a total loss. Am I missing something to check for a ground leak?
Tell me how the circuit was installed. Panel to timer to switch to pump? Is any part underground, and if so, was it in conduit? But as it appears so far, the circuit holds without the pump wired. Having it with the plug for the 120 volts removed and it attempting to run, you may have damaged it.
It is wired, sub-panel to GFI breaker, 20 feet, GFI breaker to timer, 2 feet, timer to pump, 20 feet, all in conduit, sub-panel to GFI and timer to pump are underground. Turning it on without the selector pump should have no effect, as it would prevent any of the internal circuits from powering.
You said that the GFCI was replaced. Yell me how you wired it.
It's a dual pole 50 amp square D50 amp from Lowe's. Model hash, home 250 spa safety switch type SPA amps, 50.0 indoor/outdoor fusible or non-fusible number of poles 2.0 phase type single phase, 120/240. I use one pole for the pump and the other for lighting. Black and white come in through the top, one black goes to the timer, one black for the lights. Shared neutral.
Where did you terminate the neutral pigtail from the breaker? Why did you use a 2-pole breaker instead of 2 each single-pole breakers sized for the loads? Having a 50A serving loads of lesser size is another matter.
Mostly availability was the reason for selection. Long run, it would have been easier to use to separate poles that would allow for tighter control of amps. The neutrals are pigtailed in the GFCI breaker box. I did test it by removing the hot, black line from the breaker but not the neutral. Could that cause it? Also tried taking the timer out of the loop, to no avail.
You didn't understand the question. The neutral feed should only connect to the incoming neutral and the load neutrals should connect to the breaker. The enclosure is the ground if a metal conduit was used, and if not, a separate ground should used. Is this how you wired it?
Let me get back to you in a minute. I'm going to take a pic so I can verify.
Very good. What a mess. Move the pigtail up to one of the neutral terminations. You are on a ground where the bare copper should be. Let me know the results. When this is over, you are advised to install single pole breakers sized for the loads. The 50A offers no overcurrent protection for a short. The wire will burn first.
The neutral termination you are referring to being the bar the GFCI is wired into. And can you point out which ground? I can take another pic if it helps you explain it to me.
Should I connect where the white wire is to a ground as well, or just move the white to the new location? We'll do tomorrow and get back to you, thanks. Just move the white pigtail. The lug it's on has a label that says ground terminal.
I noticed that looking at the enlarged picture. To say that I feel a little thick-skulled at the moment is an understatement. I'll check in once I move the wire. Thanks.
Not it. That is actually part of the neutral bus. The decal is for the grounding strip in the lower right. Would it be possible to use that breaker for split voltage safely? Change the wiring to send 220 to the pump and 120 to the lights? 2 single-pole GFCI breakers would be the way to do it. The breakers having 2 wires and a single termination are a code violation.
Would you be willing to draw up a quick wiring diagram for a 2 single-pole setup? Going into the box is 220V, which is sourced from a dual-pole breaker in the house's main panel. I plan on disconnecting the lights and changing the setup to 220V this evening to see if the pump will work that way. If I'm reading it correctly, that puts 120V out of each breaker. What would it look like to do 220V to the pump and 120 to the lights? I'm assuming I would have to run a new line to the breaker box.
Having only a 2-position panel, you will need to replace it to accommodate a 2-pole and a single-pole GFC breakers. The lights don't need GFCI protection unless directly associated with the pool. The feed to the panel, using a 2-pole for the pump, will be what you have and not need to be replaced.
Mike, after all is said and done, my only conclusion is that the motor itself has a flaw in the 115V configuration, or that it is a mislabeled motor from the factory and 115V is not truly configurable. I rewired the pump, timer, and junction box for 220V. Disconnected the all lighting for the time being, and it runs like a champ, in fact much better than its predecessor ever did. Moving forward, I'm thinking of getting a 4-position panel, wiring the pump, 220V, and lights, 120V, according to your diagram. This should leave me 1 position left for something else in the future, correct? Let me know if this diagram makes sense. Thanks in advance. Ricky.
Nice drawing. That will be fine.
If you have a home improvement or appliance question and want to chat with an expert now, visit justanswer.com/YTHI.